These right here are the only AI tools that you need to make better ad creatives in 2025. This video will give you a complete breakdown of the exact tools that professional teams are using right now in order to produce anywhere from 300 to 1,000 good quality professional ads every single month. These are the exact tools that are actually working right now for advertising and for creative production. Let's get into the video. So first things first, why does this matter? Now, of course, it goes without saying, the AI tool landscape right now is completely overwhelming. There are new tools basically launching every single week. It's becoming impossible to really even keep up with the rate of development within the industry. Every single tool that comes out claims that theirs is the best. Most marketers try to use all of these different tools and end up using none consistently. So what happens as a result of this? Tool paralysis. And what I mean by this specifically is that there are so many different tools to choose from. You end up spending more time trying to decipher which tool is the most relevant for your specific use case than actually picking the 2 or 3 that are the most relevant and using those on a consistent basis. But at the same time, it goes without saying, this is to be expected, and this is completely natural because there are so many teams are so concerned with staying up to date with the latest development and ensuring that they are staying up to speed with that rate of development and not falling behind and missing out on what could be potentially revolutionary technology. So therefore, they try to use every single different tool that is being released and end up using A, tools that aren't really relevant for their use case, and B, tools that don't really need to be used whatsoever and end up not really getting into depth with any of the specific tools. So within this video, I'm going to be covering 5 tools that you need, 5 foundational level tools that if you can master, then you don't need to worry about any others. We're going to be covering Claude and how you can write your ad campaign copy. Then we're going to be covering Gemini and AI Studio to analyze what works with other ads. Then we'll talk about HeyGen, which is, in my opinion, the most intuitive and the easiest way to produce the videos from a UGC perspective or just general avatar videos. Then we will cover Foreplay, which is the best tool, in my opinion, in order to know your competition in extreme levels of detail. And finally, we will cover Poppy, which is how essentially you can connect all of these different AI tools together and build workflows that systemize the entire process for you and your team. This is our actual production stack that we use at my company StudioFlow internally for our clients to help them produce anywhere from 300 to 1,000 ad creatives every single month. So in terms of a quick disclaimer of how to use this video, it is not recommended to try and adopt all of these different tools at the same time at once. In fact, what I would recommend doing, I would suggest breaking this down incrementally. Start by mastering one and then move on to the other. So first and foremost, this is going to be Claude, then add in Gemini. Once you have those foundations and you are actually using these tools effectively, add in HeyGen, then add in Foreplay, and then at the end, add in Poppy to tie all of these tools together. In my opinion, and from what I've seen across the industry, it is significantly more effective to learn mastery within these tools before moving on to another one, rather than learning 8 to 10 different tools, knowing how to use them fairly well, but really not uncovering their full potential and actually not being able to apply their full use case to your workflow. But in summary, this video, if you are spending over $25,000 per month on your paid ads, this is going to be your creative production stack. But without further ado, let's get into the tools. So first and foremost, we have Claude. Now, Claude is the copywriting foundation. Of course, most teams, I'm sure whoever you are watching this, are very much familiar with Claude, probably may even use it on a day-to-day basis and have encountered multiple different conversations and discussions regarding how good Claude is compared to something like ChatGPT. Of course, Claude is one of the largest and most commonly used LLMs alongside Gemini and ChatGPT. However, most teams from an ad creative perspective don't know how to use Claude as effectively as they can. Claude is, in my opinion, and in multiple other teams' opinions as well, probably most widely recognized as the best LLM for maintaining brand voice at scale. And just to give you a quick disclaimer as well here, this is not for everything. By no means am I saying that Claude is the best LLM for maintaining brand voice across every different aspect of your business. But from a copywriting perspective, it is far superior to any other option. This is where every single campaign should start. So in terms of comparing this, with ChatGPT, you can for sure, generate 100 headlines in just a couple of minutes, but 95 out of those 100 will sound generic. With Claude, on the other hand, presuming that you give it the correct amount of context, it will provide you with 100 headlines where at least 75% of those are immediately usable. Now, what does this mean? What's the benefit of this? It means you have brand consistency at scale. Now, why is this so important? Why is brand consistency at scale, and why is maintaining your brand voice at scale such an important part of the entire ad creation process? Well, the entire goal of this system and the entire goal of AI technology, artificial intelligence, is ultimately not to replace human creativity, but actually to amplify human creativity, to take the human judgment and use AI and this technology to further it, to take out the monotonous tasks that people don't enjoy doing, to therefore allow and facilitate humans to be more creative, think more creatively, and make better decisions, so they're spending more of their time on those creative, thought-led tasks rather than those monotonous, boring day-to-day tasks. Now, this is a prime example of what I actually mean by that. One of the most actually less creative aspects of this entire workflow is having to come up with brand guidelines, is having to ensure that every single piece of copy is on brand, because of course I get it, for every single company that is running ads, there is a specific guideline that you have to follow. There is a tone of voice that you are trying to write your copy in. There is a tone of voice in which you need to stay consistent to. And getting ChatGPT or whoever it may be to write copy that is consistently in line with that is a very tedious process, and is something that ultimately AI should be able to do itself, should be able to do without having to require any further input from yourself. And this is exactly what that does. With the proper context, you no longer need to worry about going back and forth with AI, refining every single output and every prompt to ensure that it's staying on brand. If you provide Claude with proper context, this will be done automatically for you, so you never have to worry about going back and forth with the prompt and with the output to ensure it's on brand. You give the proper context once, and going forward, every single piece of copy it gives you will be on brand, which is why it allows you, as I said, to have a much higher rate of success with your outputs, where 75% of those outputs, in terms of those headlines, for examples, are immediately usable, compared to ChatGPT, where the majority of these will sound generic because it doesn't have the ability to store that context. So then how do you use Claude effectively? This is the workflow that myself and my team that we run through. First things first, you want to go ahead and create a Claude project. Now, I'm sure you're aware with the concept of Claude project, but basically don't use Claude in a regular chat. You must be using at least Claude projects. Of course, recently they have released their skills new attribute as well, which is a very, very effective workflow. And I will be releasing a video on this shortly because there's so much to cover on this topic. But from the perspective of projects for now, projects essentially are permanent context that you feed Claude, so therefore Claude permanently remembers those aspects of your brand. You must load in as much context as physically possible. Provide as much context as you can. Everything that you have, give to the project. That includes brand voice guidelines, any specific documentation on previous ads that you've ran that were very well performing. But of course, when you do so, explain why it was well performing, and you can do the same with a bad ad or an ad that didn't perform well. Any information on the product, your audience, a description of your audience, maybe surveys and different pieces of feedback that your audience has given you, and customer review language, profiles, avatars, whatever it may be, but ensuring that you provide as much context as possible and making it as specific as physically possible. One of the biggest caveats here, I can't stress enough, is when you are providing this context to Claude, especially with the example of customer review language, make it as verbatim as physically possible. The more you can align the context you're giving Claude with actually what your customers and what your audience is saying, the higher the likelihood of it producing copy that's going to resonate with their specific goals and pain points and desires. Step 3 is to warm Claude up. This is one of the biggest parts of this process that most teams miss. They will create a project, they will feed in the context of that project, and then they will first one-shot prompt this process and expect the perfect response. But 9 times out of 10, that's not going to happen. Don't try and one-shot prompt and expect Claude to give you a perfect output first time. What I would recommend doing is going into that new chat and asking Claude just a few basic questions at the beginning to confirm that it has that context. Ask it to review and go through that project knowledge and feedback to you what it learned from that process and what it actually understands, so that you can know for certain and you have that context and you have that clarity, really more than anything, that Claude does actually have access to that project knowledge. It's read it and it understands your brand in full. When it has done that, then you want to use this prompt framework to get the best output. Now, in my opinion, and from what I have seen, every single prompt that is successful, the best prompts that we have used, and trust me, we have tested thousands and thousands of different prompts. Every single successful prompt requires 5 specific elements that you must include within it. They are, first of all, the role, then the task, then the context, then the format, and then the constraints. So to break this down in a bit more detail, when you are outlining the role, you specifically want to outline to Claude the role in which you would like it to adopt. This could be, for example, you are a master copywriter that has experience spending over $100,000 per month on ads and writing all of the ad copy for those ads. You need to assume that Claude will assume the role of whatever role that you give it, if that makes sense. So essentially, you want to tell Claude which role to assume. Then you want to give it the task. So your task is to write me 10 headlines for my new ad. Obviously, you want to go into a lot more detail than that, but the task is simply where you outline what you would like the project and the prompt to do for you. Then afterwards, you have the context. This is where you provide all of the information of your brand and really the context surrounding the actual activity that you are doing. You might be writing some headlines for some new ads that you are launching, and you want to provide context on why you are launching those ads. Are they the first ads you're launching in a new ad set? Are they iterations of a previous ad that worked well and you're coming up with some new variations to test, variations of the best performing ad? Did you launch a previous ad set that didn't work well and you're trying to make some changes in order to increase the performance of your campaign? You want to just give as much context as physically possible. I really can't stress this enough, as I actually outlined as well in step 2 in terms of the Claude project context. Just give as much context as physically possible. This is something that we cover in our 90-day AI creative training program, but really in terms of looking into the mechanics of how AI works from a foundational tech perspective, AI is not the internet. It cannot find these answers for you. It is a prediction-based engine where it's going to be looking for patterns. It's a pattern recognition tool more than anything. And if you don't give it any context, the amount of patterns it can go and look for are significantly reduced. But the more context that you give it, the more likelihood of it finding a pattern that you will ultimately recognize and is a pattern that is going to go and benefit the outcome of that prompt. So really, without trying to get more complicated on what that process looks like, the more context you can give Claude, the better the output is going to be. Then the format. This is really, really important, and another part that most teams overlook when they are prompting. Just simply tell Claude what you would like the output to be. Would you like paragraphs? Would you like a bullet point list? Would you like specific sentences? So many teams get frustrated with what the output looks like, and it's simply just because they don't outline what they would like the format to be. And then fifth and finally, the constraints. This is where we can do what's called negative prompting. Tell Claude what we don't want to be in there. One of the most common things that you can use in this section is to tell it to avoid cliche language. Now, I'm sure you've seen or you're familiar with the common nuances that AI has, these specific phrases that people comment about on Twitter and LinkedIn that ultimately make things very obvious that it's AI. These specific words and terminology and phraseology, when someone's written that sort of style, you can just automatically identify that it's been written with AI. So you can, for example, tell Claude not to use any generic cliches and give example of what those cliches look like. You can maybe add in some negative constraints in terms of previous hooks and types of hooks and styles of hooks and headlines that you would not like to include. And just basically, again, to reiterate here, the more context on what you don't want to be included, the more context on the constraints that you give Claude, the higher the likelihood of the output being aligned with your ideal output, essentially. And then finally, step 5 is iterating line by line. I can't stress this enough. Do not be afraid to go back and forth with AI and iterate until you have found an output that you are happy with. it's ultimately not going to be likely that the first output you get from any prompt, no matter how good the prompt is, that it's going to be aligned with what you are looking for. So just go line by line with the output and provide it with feedback and tell it exactly what needs improving next time. It could be based on your initial prompt in terms of going back and redoing your prompt because you've seen the output and therefore you have context on what might need to be improved in the prompt. Or you could just give it feedback on the output. And I really can't stress this enough. As I said, just continually go back and forth with the AI tool. It's a chatbot, so use it as so until it gives you the output that you are looking for. So in summary, another pro tip here really as well is when Claude gives you something great, you can go back to it and say, remember this output style for future headline requests. So then Claude will reference this for future chats in this project. Also, when you are in this process, when you're doing step 5 of iterating line by line, let's say it takes you 5 or 6 iterations going back and forth until you have an output that you are happy with. What you can do is go to Claude and you can say, what prompt would I need to use next time in order to get this specific output? Then of course it will give you feedback on your initial prompt so that going forward, your next prompt has a higher likelihood of being aligned with that output that you are happy with based on its response. So that's Claude. Now, tool number 2 is Gemini/AI Studio. This is your competitive intelligence system. It's also, in my opinion, by far the most underutilized tool in advertising. Now, Gemini can watch videos. It can literally watch and break down videos frame by frame and then tell you why they work. And no other LLM at the time of recording this video has the capability to do so. Now, this specific section is going to be broken down into 2 parts because technically Gemini and AI Studio are 2 different tools, although of course they both fall under the same umbrella of Google. But part A is Gemini as a whole and from a more broader LLM perspective. So yeah, Gemini has a very unique ability to analyze specific video ads. It can literally do this frame by frame. You don't need to download the video from a transcript perspective into a TXT file and upload that file into the chat. You can literally just post the link of a YouTube video into the chat and it will break down frame by frame exactly what is happening. So for example, a really underrated use case here is literally just downloading a competitor ad from somewhere like Foreplay or Motion or from the Facebook ad library, and then Gemini will extract all of the visual elements, the hook patterns, and the psychological triggers from that ad. So what does this mean? It means that you can find patterns that other people miss. So here is our current workflow for using Gemini effectively. First of all, collect winning ads. So yeah, go to Foreplay, go to Motion, go to Ad Library, or whichever other ad spy type tool that you currently use and find competitor ads that have been running for 30 to 60 plus days. Of course, we do that because the longer they've been running, the more they're spending. And for most successful teams, they're going to be spending money only and exclusively on ads that are performing. So download 5 to 10 of the best performing, longest running videos and then upload these into Gemini. So upload the ads that you have found and ask Gemini to extract hooks from the video, ask it to extract psychological triggers, ask it to extract visual patterns, problem solution structures, as well as specific patterns that a human analyst might miss. This is a really, really underrated prompt that you can give it. And you can go to Gemini and specifically say, watching this video, tell me some specific patterns that a human analyst might miss while watching through this specific video. And then step 3, just extract the patterns that Gemini gives you in the same format as you would go through a chat with any other LLM. So Gemini will give you an output, but of course, yes, it is your responsibility to refine it, go back and forth where necessary, but take the patterns and triggers that it's giving you because then you can identify these and this will become the base for your next creative brief. So what I mean by this is if you have a direct competitor or even an indirect competitor, we're not looking at specifically copying their ads. We're looking at what triggers are they using? What specific patterns? What structure is their video? Is it a problem, solution, product identification structure? What type of structure are they using within this? And of course, if it's working, then there's a good chance that it's going to work for you if you replicate that same pattern and that same structure without copying the video directly. So part B is AI Studio. Now this is what we call Google's prompt testing playground, a really, really underrated tool. It is completely free as well. For most teams, it's just part of your Google Workspace subscription, and it allows side-by-side prompt comparison. What does this mean? Well, it means you can validate prompts before you actually use them. Now, of course, we're getting slightly more advanced here, but here is how to use AI Studio effectively. First of all, test different variations of prompts. So after you have analyzed competitor ads with Gemini, as we just outlined in the previous process, you of course need to start generating your own. But before you use a prompt on a campaign level execution, it of course makes sense to test it and see how you can get the best output from that prompt before you actually start using it to get an output specific for your use case. So what you can do is you can test the same prompt in 2 different Gemini models to see which works best. Then you can scale it, take the winning best output and take that prompt to go and actually generate your variations. And then step 3 is just simply refining this and saving them, a really important part. So when you have found a winning structure, save that to a prompt library. And what I mean by a prompt library really can be anything from a Notion doc, a Google doc, ClickUp or Airtable, or wherever your team works internally from a workflow perspective, and just build a very simple library of proven prompts and make small edits to this as you go forward. AI Studio lets you iterate very quickly and saves you hours of having to do this manually, because essentially what you can do is you can just test which specific Gemini model will give you the best output based on your specific requirement and what that actual prompt is. So it's going to save you a lot of time when it comes to going ahead and actually prompting. Now, most teams just guess what works. They use bad prompts and they get bad outputs as a result. Instead, analyze winning ads with Gemini, as I outlined in part A, and then as I outlined in part B, test these different prompts in AI Studio and then generate with validated prompts. You will get a 70% usability rate at least with the same tools. It's just a slightly different process. So then tool 3 is HeyGen, which allows you to produce UGC videos in minutes. Of course, it goes without saying, UGC video ads are still going very strong as we go into 2026. But at the same time, hiring creators in order to produce these UGC videos is a very slow and very expensive process. With HeyGen, you can test concepts in the time to brief one specific creator. Now, as we can see, and as you're probably aware, AI video has only recently just crossed the threshold for usability. We've only just got to the point where you can just about get away with using AI video. But to make a very clear distinction here, it is good enough to test concepts, but it is not always good enough to be your final creative. So what does this mean? It means that your job is to test to find out. So to clarify before I get into the use case, when we talk about using HeyGen to produce and test UGC videos, we are not talking about the final format. We are talking about specifically for the purpose of testing, to reduce your testing time and to get better outputs when you go ahead and invest in creators. So this is the most effective workflow to go ahead and use HeyGen. First things first, write scripts in Claude. So go back to the first tool in order to review this process. We've discussed how to do this, but take your 10 best scripts from Claude and then use HeyGen to turn it into a video. With HeyGen, what you can do is you can choose different avatars. They have a very large library of avatars that you can choose from. So test and use different avatars that obviously fit with your brand obviously the most aligned with your kind of like brand personality and tone of voice. Then after you've done that, go ahead and generate the videos, paste your scripts into HeyGen, select the avatar and click generate. You will have roughly, depending obviously on what you are specifically asking HeyGen to produce, you will have anywhere from 5 to 10 UGC videos aligned with your selections in around 1 to 2 hours. And then really, you just want to go ahead and launch these and learn from them. Launch all of them. My advice would just be to launch as many different avatars as you can to get as many different pieces of data, as much information as possible from your audience in terms of what resonates and what feels most aligned with them, and then find the winners. Once you have found the winners, at that point, you then want to go ahead and hire real creators using proven scripts. So the important distinction here, as I said, is you should not be using HeyGen for literally everything ever. You are using it as what we call a validation layer, which means you can cheaply and you can quickly test variations and concepts. And that way you only invest in creators for proven, validated winners. So to simplify this and to break what I mean down here, you want to go ahead and use HeyGen to test, nothing more than that. So to test 5 to 10 different scripts, different avatars, go ahead and run those, see which get the best performance. Then you can take the proven winning script and then go ahead and invest in a real creator using that validated proven script. And the benefit of this is that, of course, typically using the pre-HeyGen and pre-AI workflow, you would be investing so much time and so much budget, of course, into these creators, testing concepts and testing different scripts that you have no idea whether they're going to resonate with or not. With HeyGen, you can launch ads and launch UGC scripts and concepts in literally just a matter of hours, and you can get data so that when you go and invest your time and your budget into UGC real creators, you are investing it with a higher likelihood of it being successful because you have a proven validated script based off of your test using AI. Now, tool number 4 is Foreplay, for competitive intelligence. Now, in order to create good ads, you need to know what's working. As they say, good artists copy and great artists steal. Now, Foreplay allows you to see what's running, what's actually working, and therefore allows you to reverse engineer winners. This is the Facebook ad library, but basically on steroids. Now, Foreplay allows you to track a lot of different things in terms of metrics. You can look at different brands, different industries, different keywords, different formats, different visuals, but importantly, it allows you to see how long an ad has been running for. So what does this mean? Well, it means you can spot trends before anyone else does. Here is the most effective workflow in order to use Foreplay effectively. Step 1, the research phase. Before every single campaign you run, you should be going on Foreplay and actually going through different ads. So search by your industry or your type of product, your product category, filter by ads that have been running for at least 30 days and save the best. Foreplay has a great ability to save these different ads into these different swipe files as they were, and then once you have done that, you can start analyzing patterns from within those ads. So step 2, yes, is pattern analysis. Start looking for patterns within those ads. Look at the hooks, look at the offer visuals, look at the offers, then look at the visuals, and then the CTAs. How are ads starting? What types of hooks are these brands using? What offers are working? What visuals are trending? And of course, as well, you can use Gemini to do this, as I outlined previously. Step 3 is to then feed this into your process. So take the patterns from Foreplay, use them in Gemini, Claude, Poppy, as we'll go into shortly, and HeyGen, as I've just outlined. You're not copying here, you are simply just learning from pre-validated winners. Now, when you master Foreplay, you essentially never need to guess at what creative to make. You know what's working before you create the ads, and you can spot trends early. It also significantly cuts down your creative strategy time. So to emphasize on the benefit of this, really just to kind of like go back onto that point I made, good artists copy, great artists steal. You are by no means doing anything wrong by taking proven winners, just by stealing what other brands are doing. Now, of course, and again, another important distinction, by no means am I telling you to literally directly rip what other companies and competitors are doing. I'm talking about taking winning ads and breaking them down, trying to understand the why behind the reason why they worked in the first place. What psychological triggers are they using? What specific elements, what different structures is this ad actually deploying, and what makes it work? And then once you understand what makes it work and you have reversed engineered that specific successful ad, you can go and rebuild up from the start and reapply those same tactics, those triggers and those specific structures within your own ads. And you are essentially taking the borrowed spend from these companies. Now, these companies would have already invested tens of thousands of dollars, potentially even more, into these ads. And it makes sense for you to just let them do that, let them spend and go through their budget to find the answers and gather the data. And then you can essentially steal that data from them and go and benefit from it yourself. So then 5th and finally, we have Poppy. Poppy is a content workflow tool because ultimately once you have all of these individual tools, you then need to connect them together and build a system. And Poppy is a visual workspace where you can bring multiple different pieces of context together. And ultimately, the most important part of the entire usage of AI is that context. So therefore, there is no better way to really leverage this than bringing together the context of different tools. It's where these individual tools systemize and become a workflow. Poppy, really, just to kind of give you a breakdown if you're unfamiliar, is a visual board. You can drag and drop different tools, you can connect them together, and yeah, it's like if Miro, Claude, and Notion had a baby. So what does this mean? It means you can systematize your entire AI creative production process and ultimately get closer to the point in which this runs autonomously without your oversight. So here is how you use Poppy effectively. Step 1 is to set up what's called permanent context. You should be adding in 3 foundational pieces of permanent context, which should be your brand context, which you can just take from Claude as we outlined in that first tool overview, the knowledge base, which goes over how to do something specifically well based on whatever you are trying to do, and a library of examples. So to recap on what I mean by a knowledge base, let's say the purpose of using Poppy is to take an example of a static ad that a competitor has made and to recreate that ad for your brand. The brand context, of course, would be giving Poppy context on your brand. A library of examples would be these competitor ads that you have found that you would like to replicate. But then the knowledge base would be the underlying specificity behind what makes an ad work. Now, of course, if you're giving context on a brand, Poppy knows everything about your brand. If you're giving it a library of competitor examples, it can see what you're trying to replicate. But without the knowledge base, it has no way of understanding why that specific ad worked well. And if it doesn't know that, then it's not going to be able to replicate the underlying triggers behind what made it work for your ad. So within that knowledge base, for this example, you would be giving a document to Poppy basically explaining the 101 behind what makes a static ad convert, going into detail about the specific elements that make a static ad effective. Then of course, in this instance, Poppy is going to be referencing that when it actually tries to understand what makes those competitor ads work well. So then when it recreates the ad for your company, what it's going to be doing is leveraging the effective triggers, the structures within those competitor ads. Step 2 is to add those competitor ads. So take a winning competitor ad or even a few that, yes, you found previously on Foreplay or the ad library or wherever it may be. You can drag them into Poppy so that they are visible on the board. Then step 3 is to connect everything to AI. It's a very, very visual tool. As I said, it's kind of like a Miro if you're familiar. What you can very simply do is drag these connection lines from the different tools to one another, and then you can connect the context to the AI chat within the tool. So then when you prompt within that AI chat, it ensures that the AI sees everything and it references those different pieces of permanent context that you have already set up. Then step 4 is to prompt for recreation. So always start, just like we outlined with the Claude process, by verifying that it can see everything and just essentially warming it up. You want to make sure that it's read through the document where you've given it the context on how to create a winning static ad. You want to make sure that it's seen all of those different competitor ads and all of the context that you have given it on your brand. Then you want to ask it to go ahead and recreate ad variations for your brand using all of the context and all of the examples. And step 5 is your output. You will get instant variations. It will generate you on-brand variations that match the exact example structure. And yeah, this literally will take you 2 minutes to do compared to the hours it would take you to do this manually. So to recap on the power of this tool, essentially you can go into Poppy and you can give it examples of winning competitor ads. You can give it all of the context on your brand and your specific tone of voice and guidelines, and you can give it some details on what makes a winning static ad. Then you can feed that, connect it to the AI chat, and ask the chat, prompt it to recreate ideas for copy for your brand using the output from your competitors. And what it will do is it will go ahead and recreate that static ad for your brand using the reasons why that previous competitor ad was successful, obviously drawing that into your specific brand. Now, the real benefit of Poppy as well from a systemized perspective is the repeatability of this. You can build this board, as I've just outlined this example. You build this board once and then anyone else on your team can come in and do the same. They don't need to know anything about AI. They don't need to know how to prompt. You can build this, you can set this up, and they can come in and they can leverage it. They can add in any other competitor ads that they've seen that they like. They can add any more context that you may develop as your brand matures, and then they can go ahead and do the exact same thing that I've just outlined how to do. So then, to give you an example of what this workflow would look like, to put this all together, here is how you would create 50 ad variations for a brand new campaign. So first of all, from a research perspective, go into Foreplay, find winning ads, upload them into Gemini, and ask it to break down frame by frame what made that ad successful. What structure is it using? What psychological triggers are being deployed within that ad? What would make someone stop scrolling and watch that video within the first 3 seconds? What type of hook is it using? Then the second stage is copywriting. So go into AI Studio, test different prompts as I outlined how to, and then use the winning prompt to generate copy in Gemini or within Claude. Then we have the production. So turn your headlines into scripts, again, using Claude, upload these into HeyGen, select your avatars, and ask it to produce you 5 to 10 UGC videos that you can test. Then the final part of this is the systematization. You want to bring all of this together into a workflow. So create variations in Poppy, as I've just outlined how to, or you could even go into ChatGPT and ask it to produce static ads. So really, if we look at the benefit of this, 4 hours of active work would produce you 50 professional ad variations. And compare this to doing everything manually, like what you would have had to have done before these AI tools came into place. You'd be looking at least 8 hours for a manual copywriter to write these headlines. You'd be looking at 6 hours for a strategist to come up with these 15 UGC video scripts. You'd be talking at least 2 to 3 weeks to produce 15 UGC videos. And of course, a lot of budget spent in these creator costs and hiring out studios and photography and whatever it may be. You'd be looking at least 4 hours at a bare minimum for a graphic designer to make 10 static ads. So we're talking really around 18 hours to do the initial processes, then a good few weeks in order to turn these into videos, and at least $3,000 in spend. And with AI, you can do that for about $100 in subscription costs and about 4 hours in total time. So at this point, you now know the 5 main tools, the 5 foundational level tools that you need to master in order to improve the efficiency of your creative production process. But knowing does not equal implementing. You simply need to make a decision. You can either implement this yourself, which will take you 3 to 5 months at least to experiment with these different tools, see competitors test 10 times more than you at the same time. Or what you can do is you can steal our proven systems that we have developed over the last 18 months, that we have trained teams on, and learning one-to-one through this process to achieve mastery in as little as just 90 days. So if you would like me and my team to directly train you and your team to build these exact AI creative systems and a whole lot more, like I've just outlined, over the course of a 90-day process, then I invite you to book a call with my team, and the link to that will be in the description below this video. But to just make it very clear, this training is not for everyone, so we only work with companies that are spending a minimum of $25,000 every single month on paid ads. So if you are looking to systematize your AI creative production process at scale, click the link in the description below this video, book a call with our team, and we will see if we can help you. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next video.